local, and those are their own bag of worms for sure. Or is it a can? I don't know. Something with worms.
Bag of worms.
Yeah. It feels like a bag, okay? It feels like a shit bag sometimes
It's not
because
even as like structural as a can.
it's just. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Booth. I'm Jade, and with me, as always, is my co host and award winning producer, Heather.
And on this channel, we talk about wild stories from Comic-Con vendors. And on today's episode, our topic is actually event applications, which I think is kind of a big time for doing that right now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, with the thing about doing these types of events is a lot of times you have to apply for them super early, sometimes even years ahead of when you want to do it, which when you're starting out is absolutely an insane ask. So for a lot of these events that we do, the more coveted they are, the harder they are to get into, and the more advanced you have to apply for them. So when you're applying, there's a whole list of things that you have to get started before they'll even look at you. So you want to think of this as like any other application, like for a job or for a college, you have to have your ducks in a row.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess that's true. And that's really like, so what kind of ducks do people need? Like,
Okay, so there's so
especially
many
if they're
ducks.
starting out. Yeah.
So many ducks. Okay, so one of the things that you need to have in order is the information about your business. And we're going to keep calling it a business at this point. Whether you want to think of it as your booth or your hobby, that's up to you. But in this case, I'm going to go with the angle as it's a business. So they need the name that you're going to go under. So sometimes people have like an LLC or LTD or something like that that is under a different name than what their actual booth would be called. So,
Mm.
for example, my booth and business are the same name. It's all Tokyo Dog Designs, but some people have like altered reality entertainment, but it's actually Colorado Comic Con is what they put on everything. So it just depends on kind of what you're doing with your business. But assuming that everything's the same, you need a telephone number, which is something you wouldn't really think of, but a lot of people put their personal numbers. Like a lot of artists will use their personal numbers. I don't do that. I use Google Voice, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about Google in this because it is a free service for most of us. And it really is something that is very common in business. People will just say, oh, just send me your link, send me your Google Drive folder, and we'll review it. You get that a lot. So, and it's something you don't have to pay for, whereas other subscription services you do, depending on how much data you have.
Yeah.
So you also need a reliable email address. I say reliable, I mean, it's something that you're constantly checking because in some cases you'll get approved. And if they're not the type of venue that requires you to pay as you apply, which we will definitely talk about, you need to pay as soon as you get that email because they'll send that email to everyone and it's only based off of how much space there is and who paid first that gets in. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to have an email that you can access. And then, of course, many of you are probably familiar that you do need social media, but you need social media specifically for this business, and they will ask for it. They're going to ask for your Facebook or your Twitter 9 times out of 10. I haven't had anybody ask me for TikTok, but they ask for a lot of Instagram, Facebook, and my website.
Yeah.
If you don't have a website, they may not consider you. Actually, the first time I applied for a major group, they said, great, your products look cute, but you don't have a website. I was like, I know, I'm still building it. And they're like, well, we'll take a risk on you.
Mhm.
And I showed them my other websites that I had from other businesses. I was like, hey, I am a real person. I actually do know what I'm doing. I'm just so new. It was my second week in research and development of the product.
Mhm.
So I was busy doing that and not putting together a website. And a lot of us are doing this all by ourselves.
Right.
We're like, pull up your bootstraps, kind of thing where we're doing everything ourselves because we don't have the capacity to hire somebody to do it for us.
Yeah.
So those are like the things that that's the first page of the application is knowing what's going on. So really my first step when I started looking at applying for things that were local and non-local, and those are their own bag of worms for sure, or is it a can? I don't know, something with
Bag of
worms.
worms.
Yeah, it feels like a bag, okay? It feels like a shit bag sometimes
It's not
because
even as like structural as a can.
it's just different. It's just different depending on where you go. So I'm gonna use bag worms because it feels like a shit bag sometimes
I
of
like
the
it.
stuff you have to dig through in order to get accepted. So what I do with my Google Calendar, and Google, if you want to sponsor any of our episodes, reach out
Please
to us.
feel free.
We would love to accept your money and talk about a service that we're going to talk about anyways.
Yes, email us
Um,
at talkbehindthebooth@gmail.com and we will put you up on here, Google.
Sponsors. Yeah. So anyways, I do the research, which a lot of people don't want to do. I suggest doing the research and using Google Calendar and splitting the screen. This is usually how I do it. I find all the events that I'm interested in and I do my research on the events. How many people are anticipated to be there? What was the buzz? What celebrities did they bring in? And what were people talking about with that? Is it something I want to go to? Or was there a major problem? And did they fix that problem or are they just expecting to have that happen again? And that's a whole other episode. So Heather,
Oh
we need
yeah.
to do that one.
Oh yeah.
But I go into Google Calendar and I put in all the events I want to do and I make them gray because colors make sense in my brain. So when I get accepted to an event, I change the color. So I know I'm like, yep, I've paid, I'm ready to go, everything is moving its way. So then you can also see when you put it in a calendar which things overlap because a lot of these events will overlap. And we don't mean overlap like by a week, we're overlapping like as in the same exact weekend in two different locations,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Yep.
So if you're somebody who doesn't have the ability to travel, look at what's local, see what you can do and see what you can apply for. When you do your first bit of application is all the information. And so I use, once again, Google to save my application information. So I don't have to type it in every time. Mm-hmm. They want your address, they want your phone number, and all that stuff is separate from my personal stuff. So when I log into my email address for this business, I have everything saved under that. So, I have multiple profiles depending on what I'm doing. So if it's personal stuff, it's one email. If it's a business, hence the other one. So I have it auto put that in for me because that can take so much time. Mm-hmm. And it's information that is available to anyone who has a computer because you have to register with your taxes and things like that, your LLC. So that information is there anyways. So you put in that first bit, then the second page that they're going to ask usually is for pictures and descriptions of what you have.
Right. I remember the first time you were doing it, they asked you for a picture of your booth and you're like, I haven't done this yet. I don't have a booth. What did you do in that situation?
Yeah, I did not. I had not done a single event. I had no idea what my booth was even going to look like. So what I did is I had a table that I use for when my friends come over and play Magic. It's a 6-foot table that folds because I don't have a lot of room in my house. And I put on, literally, I didn't even have a tablecloth. I put on a sheet.
No, nice.
I put a sheet down and I created this in my garage with a white background behind me, nothing special. And I built my mini booth and I had my husband take a picture.
Perfect.
And it was like so bottom of the basement looking picture, but it showed them what my display looks like. And a lot of these events are for families. So they kind of need to see what do you have. They want pictures of what you're selling. And if you have anything outside the description, a lot of times they will tell you you can't bring that or it wasn't in your contract. So you need to list as many things as you can. But also sometimes they'll limit you to like 5 things. And so I know.
Like 5 different categories of items?
No, like just 5 items. And they're separated by a comma. So how I got around this is I use an ampersand and made it one word and then put a comma. So that way I was within, you gotta be smart. I was within what they said if I had to listen it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. So some of them are like that. And then within the application, they usually have little check boxes that you say you're either arts and prints or toys and collectibles, plushes, that kind of stuff, fan art. And a lot of times they'll have other. So what I invented falls into other because it's not a toy. It's not a collectible. And I'm not selling the art itself. I'm selling the tool to make the art.
Yeah.
And so I have a little mini description that I put in. And once again, to save time, I've written an email that has all of this stuff already written out that I copy and paste in because I save it as a draft.
Yeah.
Because you want to make it consistent every time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you can fulfill like multiple contracts all at once. So FanX was one where they have 4 events a year. And they'll ask, hey, do you want to apply to our other events? And there will be a link that you can literally go from one application to the next because they want you applying.
That's nice.
Some places do that. I won't say that everyone does. Mm-hmm. So that is page 2 of 3.
Oh my goodness.
So after you've uploaded all of your photos, sometimes they want a YouTube channel. If you have videos, any of that kind of information, you put that on there. And then the last page is usually what kind of booth do you want? So some places will be very rigid with their artists versus vendor booths, and there is a difference between the two.
Mhm.
Artist booths tend to be half to a third of the price, approximately. Now, again, I suck at math. So if there's like a different ratio that you're like, actually, it's this, write me an email. Don't tell me how you did it. I'm just going to work with what you said because there are specialists for math. I am not one of them. But that tends to be what the difference is. So expect for most booths to pay, like if you're a vendor, between $500 and $1,500 at least. Now, that's also another key indicator on how popular the show is how much are the booths. If the booths are really cheap, tends to be that that's not a super huge event. One of the events I'm going to, a vendor booth is for an inline. So there is a difference between inline corners and there's some
End
other things.
caps?
There's end caps. Yeah, they all have these different names for
Yeah.
things. But an inline, which is supposed to be the cheapest and worst, according to their finances, what they think is the worst position, is 1,500.
Yeah, and so for people who do not go to conventions or you're not sure what we're talking about, like they set up all these booths just in a bunch of rows, right? And then there's just aisles that people walk through. And so inline, it actually isn't one of the best ones that you can have because you're in the aisle, right? People are like walking past so many vendors at that point. So to have a corner or an end cap or whatever the crap they call it at that one, is generally better because you get more kind of face time. You don't have as many competing people around you, but I mean, it still works. Like the last one
Mm-hmm.
we went to, we had an inline and it still worked pretty well.
Yeah, and we're very different with how we do our booth setup. And that is a great episode that we're going to be coming out with soon, which is what to put in your booth, how to build your booth,
Yeah.
and how to do it on a budget.
Yeah.
Because you have to travel and traveling light's important.
Right.
So you'll have these different options on where to put your booth. Um, Usually the end caps go first because of that kind of priority thing. So if you think about when you go to a grocery store, especially around times like we're in the United States. So in Thanksgiving time on the end caps, how many times do you pass pumpkin pie stands of
Cranberry
just like
sauce.
on the end? And they're just reminders as you're walking past, like, oh, I need to go get milk, but you pass like a thing of pumpkin pie, then you pass a thing of the green beans and all and cranberry sauce. They do that for a
Yeah.
reason. And those companies pay more at that time of year to put their items on the end cap.
Yep.
So that way you have to see them. So that's kind of what that looks like. Artist Alley, as they usually call it, has a similar thing. We're usually, instead of having like drapes on the side and drapes behind us, we're just kind of sardined in with each other. But again, the booth is cheaper. And usually you only have inline and end caps. Now, my setup is a forward facing setup. Mine does not utilize the end cap. So I never go for those. And they're more expensive. So once you select which one you want, and sometimes they'll have maps and you can see like what it'll look like. Sometimes they don't. And
Yeah.
you just have to say, okay, I'll take an inline. Or they might only have inline left. You're like, I guess that's what I'm getting. And it's just kind of up to like the fates as to what you're going to get when you get there.
Right.
Um, Most of the places will require you to pay in full
Hmm.
before they accept you. That's kind of heartbreaking sometimes when you are brand new and you have really no capital to work with and you have to apply so early, sometimes a year early, that you will not see that $300 to $1,500 investment for that long. And that's assuming you get accepted. Now, a lot of times when you do that, they will refund your money, of course. You didn't get in, so they're going to send you your money back. But you're also, well, did I get into that show? There's another show that's overlapping the same weekend that I could apply for. But, I have to wait on both of them to tell me which one I got in.
Hmm.
And once you apply, it's non-refundable, so if you get in, you can't get your money back. So it's really stressful. It's
Hmm.
really hard. There are some that just say put a deposit in, and if you don't get in, we'll send it back. Or like that example I gave of you apply and then you watch your email like a hawk because as soon as it comes in, you have to pay for your booth or else you don't get one.
Hmm.
So it's a very hard, stressful situation,
Yeah.
but it can definitely be worth it, especially if you go to a show. This happens a lot, and you had a great show. And they always, at the last day, usually Sunday morning, if it's a 3 day, will put a flyer on your table that is your re-sign up. They usually
Yeah.
have an incentive that it's the same price as this year, or it's a certain percentage off or whatever. And if you sign up that weekend, you can lock in that place, lock in that price, and at least you're in next year.
Right.
But you have to decide, was it a good enough show? Do you want to come back next year? Was there another one that maybe happened the same weekend and they haven't put out their schedule yet? Like it's kind of a thing. But when I say there's shows that you get into that are coveted, like you're not going to give up that booth.
Yeah.
You know that it's the one that you want to come to. So you fill it out, pay them on the spot, and move on. And that's a little easier because you've already made your money for the weekend. So you can hand them cash and be like, hey, or whatever it is that you want to use. You've made money. You're not at this starting point of, I have nothing. I only have this much money to stretch this far.
Yeah.
And you have to hope you make your money back and some. So it's a very hard place to be, which is why I called it a bag of worms, because it is a shit bag.
Well, and when you're just starting out, like she said, you don't have the capital, you don't have the means to really be like, oh yeah, I just want to apply for everything. So how can you tell people how to be a little bit discerning with that and how to figure out where they should start really?
Well, I've only been at this for less than a year. So I'm not obviously going to be the guru that can tell you, oh, absolutely, go to this one. If you have this, you go to this one.
Right.
The first thing you have to figure out is your demographic. Where are they going to be? So when I started, I kind of did the shotgun approach. I tried a bunch of different types of shows, and the shows that had the best connection with me, who are my best customers and my people, were people that go to Comic-Con, Starfest, Collecticon, any of these things that have that nerd element to it. Those were my people. And so I started to figure out, okay, from there, I researched my balls off. Okay. I was looking at everything. I was talking to other vendors. And that was probably my secret sauce. I'd say like, hey, so I did this one. They're like, oh yeah, I did that one last year. It was really bad, but this year it was good. Or they say like, oh my gosh, this particular one is great. Do as many of their shows as you can. They'll also tell you what regions are good. So for us, great regions were Dallas, Denver, and some of the kind of where they find Bigfoot, like Portland and Washington and Vancouver, like
Yeah.
the ones that are over there appeal to what we have. And so you'll talk to people. Sometimes they'll tell you like, well, I'm from Florida, so I do all the Florida ones.
Hmm.
They're great for me. I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but now you don't have travel expenses on top of it.
Yeah.
And that is really where most of your money goes. It's not to the actual con, it's to hotels, then like flights, Ubers, Lyfts, whatever that happens to be, and then food.
Hmm.
Because at cons, as you guys know, food's expensive.
Yeah.
And anywhere around there, even within the hotels, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So that can also be another additive of cost.
Yeah. And we'll do a whole other episode on that as well, with travel expenses and actually like physically being their expenses as well, because
Yeah.
there's a whole lot that we can go into with that. But is there any like last minute things for applications that you would like to say, or do you just want to wrap it up?
I would just say, look around, do your research, see what their marketing looks like. If you type it into Google, how much is Fan Expo talking about things? What celebrities do they have? When you talk to other vendors, did they do those shows? Ask them about shows you're interested in, and find a vendor that is similar to you, especially at your price point and similar to what you have. So we have a lot of Pride stuff in our booth. I talked to other artists that do Pride stuff. I said, hey, where have you had luck? Where would you go? What shows were good? And did you have any that bombed? And they'll tell you because they have an opinion. Because when you lose money or make money, you have an opinion.
And you remember.
Yeah. And yeah, we remember. It's a hard lesson. So yeah, just talk to other people, make friends, be as nice as possible. And yeah, I mean, every application's different. So do your best to kind of make something somewhat uniform and then adjust as needed.
Yep, and keep those. Oh yeah, Google, come talk to us because we love you. You do a lot. But yeah, keep all that information where you can do it really easily, because the less stress you can put on yourself, filling forms out all the time, and and then more focusing on where am I going to get the money to do this, the a little bit better it will be. So thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We hope to see you next week.
And a special thank you to Nerdy Girl Podcast for sponsoring this episode. We'll see you next time.